Butler production. Let's get it.
Hello, and welcome back to my channel, where we talk about all things women's health, strength, and thriving through every season of life. It's me, Dr. Butler, your favorite exercise scientist. So I took a short break for some much-needed R&R. And let me tell you, the rest and recovery did exactly what it was supposed to do. And now I'm back, recharged and ready. Midlife is a season of evolution. And let's be real. It can also make you feel like you're on an emotional roller coaster that you never agreed to ride on. During the menopausal stages, our brain and body are responding to shifting hormones, changing stress thresholds, and a nervous system that's working overtime to keep us grounded. In today's episode, we're breaking down what's actually happening with mood, stress, and emotional regulation during perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause. And more importantly, what you can do to support yourself through it. We're talking science, strategy, and self-compassion because you deserve to understand your body, protect your peace, and feel grounded again. Let's get into it. Finally, there is a growing conversation around women's health and hormonal conditions that are still widely misunderstood. Because let's be honest, our mothers and grandmothers are not talking about it. Shoot, if we really want to be honest, the clinicians aren't talking about it either. So many women are dealing with hormonal-driven anxiety, mood shifts, and cognitive changes ends up being mislabeled. Instead of clinicians recognizing that hormonal patterns underneath were often diagnosed with things like borderline personality disorder because of the emotional swings, or bipolar disorder because of the irritability followed by low mood crashes. And many are simply told they have depression or generalized anxiety without anyone even asking whether their hormones play a role in it. When we think about estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, we usually associate them with things like periods, fertility, muscle, bone health. But these hormones have a big impact on the brain. They can easily move into the brain and help shape how it works, how it communicates, and how it uses energy. During the menopausal stages, the brain goes through a major adjustment. It's basically learning how to operate with a completely different level of hormones. The retraining process is a big reason why mood, memory, and stress can feel so different during this stage of life. Estrogen acts as a master key for the female brain, energy. It heavily populates areas responsible for memory, mood, and temperature control. When estrogen levels fluctuate wildly, and then ultimately drop during perimenopause and menopause, the brain experiences a temporary energy crisis. Brain glucose metabolism can decrease up to 20 to 25%. This is just a fancy way of saying how our brain uses sugar for energy. Glucose in the brain is the main fuel source. As the same way a gas fuels car, our brain doesn't store energy. It needs a steady supply of glucose to keep us thinking clearly, to regulate emotions, to manage stress, and do all the behind-the-scenes work to keep our bodies running. Next is progesterone. Progesterone is traditionally viewed as the hormone of pregnancy, but in the brain, it acts as a powerful neuron protectant and calming agent. Progesterone is usually the first hormone to take noticeable dip during perimenopause because ovulation starts to become hit or miss. When progesterone drops, so does the calming natural soother for our brain and our nervous system. So when the brain suddenly isn't getting that steady, calming support anymore, the whole system feels it. Our stress tolerance drops. Our mood feels more sensitive, and symptoms like anxiety, irritability, restless sleep, and waking up in the middle of the night show up way before the classic hot flashes ever do. The last hormone that I want to highlight that affects our brain is testosterone. Testosterone plays a bigger role in women's brain than more people realize. It's heavily involved in areas that drive motivation and confidence, how we process space and movement. In other words, it's a key player on how we're energized, how we focus, and capable of how we feel. Unlike estrogen and progesterone, which experience a steep cliff-like drop, testosterone tends to drop more gradually with age. However, because estrogen drops so sharply, the testosterone to estrogen ratio changes. When the absolute levels of testosterone runs too low, women often report a loss of mental drive, localized fatigue, and a drop in libido, and feeling like a lost edge or loss of confidence. For a long time, the menopausal stages were treated as if they were only about ovaries, just the end of the reproductive years and nothing more. But newer brain research tells us a whole different story. The menopausal stages aren't just a reproductive transition. It's actually a major brain transition. The brain is one of the first places to feel the hormonal shifts and where many of the symptoms truly begins. The brain and the ovaries are deeply connected. So when the estrogen and progesterone starts to decline, the brain feels it first. Those shifts trigger a major remodeling process in the brain, changing how certain networks communicate, how the brain uses energy, and even the overall chemistry of the nervous system. In simple terms, the hormonal shifts happening in our ovaries create real, measurable changes in our brains. Estrogen is the main driver of energy in women's brain. It helps the brain pull in glucose, and it tells the mitochondria, our little cell power plants, to make ATP, which is basically the body's energy currency. During perimenopause, when estrogen starts dropping, the whole system gets disrupted. The brain's estrogen receptors aren't getting the same signals anymore. So the energy making process becomes less efficient. This creates what is called a hypometabolic state, which is just a scientific way of saying that the brain is running on less fuel than it's used to. In other words, our brain is trying to do the same amount of work with less energy coming in. And baby, we're going to feel it. This shift in the brain energy system shows up on the outside as sudden brain fog, slower thinking, and deeper fatigue that feels like it came out of nowhere. It's your brain signaling that it's running on less fuel than it's used to. Next is the structural remodeling, which leads to a loss of gray matter. Remember in my episode on cognitive and emotional changes, I discussed the changes in the brain structure and the gray matter. If not, I urge you to go watch the episode after this episode to get a little more details about these changes. Today, I just want to remind you that the hormonal shifts is not just chemical. It also alters the brain physical structure. As estrogen and progesterone declines, certain region of our brain in gray matter shrinks slightly. Gray matter contains the nerve cell bodies responsible for us processing information, controlling movement, and managing emotions. The most noticeable areas it's going to help with is memory, attention, emotional balance, and stress regulation. This is why we suddenly feel forgetful, overwhelmed, or emotionally sensitive. The most famous symptom of the menopausal stages is hot flashes, which is entirely a central nervous system glitch. Deep in the hypothalamus, the part of the brain that acts like our internal thermostat, there's a small group of neurons that are extremely sensitive to estrogen. So when the estrogen levels drop, these neurons act as enlarged and they become overactive. Then lastly, we have mood and sleep disturbances. The overactivity tricks the hypothalamus into thinking that our body is overheating, and we begin to experience sudden heat, sweating, and a racing heart with intense wave of flushing. It's not random. It's our brain misreading the temperature signals because the estrogen is no longer keeping these neurons in check. Estrogen and progesterone plays a huge role in our mood chemicals that are made up in our brain and how they respond to them. So when these hormones start swinging up and down and eventually crashing, it sets off a whole chain reaction in the brain's chemistry. A decrease in estrogen lowers serotonin levels. Serotonin, which normally regulates mood, sleep, and emotional calmness, but when it decreases, we become depressed, irritable, and we begin to panic. Then dopamine decreases. Dopamine controls motivation and focus. Low dopamine can leave us feeling sluggish, distracted, and less joyful. The last brain change I want to highlight today is changes in the autonomic nervous system, the part of our body that controls our atomic fight or flight or rest and digest responses, which becomes less steady during the menopausal stages. As estrogen and progesterone shifts, the chemicals that help regulate this system, they swing out of balance. When that happens, our stress response can fire at the wrong time, leaving us suddenly on edge, jumpy, or even experience panic-like waves that seems to come out of nowhere. So now we have discussed why we have mood changes and what is actually happening in our brains during the menopausal stages. What lifestyle strategies can we apply that actually work? I'm so glad you asked. When hormones start shifting, the brain and the nervous system feel it first. But the beautiful part is our lifestyle can directly support the brain's ability to adapt, stabilize, and thrive. Here's how a clear, everyday language is going to work. First and foremost, we must prioritize protein and balanced meals. Our brain needs a steady fuel, especially when glucose metabolism drops. So we need to aim for 25 to 35 grams of protein at each meal. Pair the carbs with protein or fat to keep the blood sugar steady. Include omega-3s, salmon, sardines, walnuts, chia seeds for brain health. Why does it matter? Stable blood sugar equals fluor. Mood swings, less anxiety, and better focus. Next, my favorite, of course, strength training. We need to do that 2 to 4 times a week. Non-negotiable. Period. It builds muscles, which improves glucose handling. It supports the mitochondria health. It boosts mood-regulating chemicals, and it improves quality of sleep. Strong muscles equals stronger brain. Remember in my episode, the non-exercise activities? If not, you're going to want to go check that out. Non-exercise movement is one of the most powerful tools during the menopausal stages for brain health. You can take a 10-minute walk after meals, movement snacks every hour. That's like tiny bits of movement you sprinkle throughout the day, like body weight squats, hip circles, marching in place. Or you can do light chores, pacing and stretching. Why does it matter? NEAT improves insulin sensitivity and it reduces the brain energy deficit. Prioritize sleep with a consistent bedtime. Limit your screen time 1 hour before sleep. Make sure the room is dark and cool. Regulate the nervous system with breath work, yoga, and stretching. The last thing I want to highlight is to reduce alcohol and ultra-processing food. Alcohol intensifies hot flashes, sleep issues, and anxiety. Ultra-processed food spikes blood sugar and it worsens brain fog. Why does it matter? Removing these stressors is going to give your brain room to adapt. We'll wrap the conversation up there today. Midlife is not a breakdown. It's a transition. Your brain, your mood, your energy are responding to real physiological shifts. When you understand what's happening inside your body, you can stop blaming yourself and start supporting yourself. Remember, you're not too emotional. You're not losing it, and you're definitely not alone. Your brain is adapting, your hormones are recalibrating, and you're learning a new version of yourself, one that is wiser, stronger, and more grounded than ever. Give yourself grace. Give yourself structure. Give yourself the same compassion you give everyone else in life. If this episode helped you, share it with another woman who needs it to hear it. And don't forget to like and comment. And as always, stay strong, stay curious, stay connected to your body, and I will see you in the next episode.